Hey, I'm Josh.
And I'm Allison, and we're the Camera Project.
Today we're reviewing the Fuji X-Pro2. It's an APS-C size 24.3 megapixel camera. It's got an X-Trans 3 sensor, and we're shooting here down in Manhattan's Chinatown.
And we are currently on Doyer Street, colloquially known as the Bloody Angle, because it was a popular meeting place for gangs back in the day. And as of 1994, law enforcement said that more individuals met a violent death at this intersection than anywhere else in the United States. And we are currently standing in front of Namwa Tea Parlor, which opened in 1920. It's the first tea parlor to open in Chinatown. And it's kind of, you can't really see inside too much, but it's decorated in the style of kind of a classic American diner. The intention there was that it would draw in people who were not necessarily Chinese to try Chinese food, what at the time was an exotic, different cuisine.
So we're gonna walk around and explore Chinatown and test out the Fuji X-Pro2 and see what it can do on the street. After all, what makes this camera unique is its rangefinder styling, which we'll talk a little bit more about later. So let's get going.
So a lot of the violent crime that took place on this bloody angle was between Tong gangs who would meet here. A lot of it was gun violence, but there was also a number of violent crimes committed using hatchets, which is, I believe, where the term hatchet man may have originated. So not just strangling, it's not just your run-of-the-mill strangling or beating, a lot of hatchet crime as well.
On that note,
let's see.
So our friends over at Lens2Go gave us the X-Pro2 as well as the 23 1.4 lens. It's a really great combo. As with other Fujis, it's really big on having actual knobs and dials for all of the main functions. So we've got a shutter speed dial, an exposure compensation, and almost all of the Fuji Pro lenses certainly have the aperture ring. What was your experience with the knobs and dials?
It's funny because I know that this is like kind of the original, this is how cameras are. This is an analog style of controls, and a lot of people prefer this, especially people who are old school. I have shot on an analog camera, but realistically I grew up shooting digital. So for me, this is, there's a learning curve here, and it takes longer for me to adjust to, and I find it a little harder and a little clunky.
Well, get ready for the old people and the hipster hate in the comments.
Oh yeah, everybody's gonna shit all over me for that one. But whatever, I'm gonna say what I'm gonna say. Every shooter's different. I think Josh and I both agreed, actually, this lens, the aperture ring was a little too easy to, a little too easy to turn. If you reach up for focus, or anything really, like if you're just picking the camera up, you can just knock that out very easily, which I did a lot, and I tend to shoot in aperture priority, so it's like, you know, if you set everything else to auto, that's like kind of annoying.
Right. Yeah, I do that a lot as well, and I found that I constantly, just supporting the camera, I tended to turn the ring, so it definitely could be stiff in the hair on the lens. Now, going back to the camera itself, you mentioned being a digital shooter, but as a digital camera, it is unique. Other than Leicas, which are gonna run, you know, 8 to 10 grand, this is the only real sort of rangefinder experience in an interchangeable lens camera that you're gonna find out there, other than, of course, the older X-Pro1. And that's unique because you can look through the viewfinder and frame up your shot before your shot happens. Because you're seeing a wider field of view, you can anticipate people's movements and get ready for them to walk into your frame.
As the counterpoint digital shooter, I did try to use that as well when I was shooting with this camera, and it's kind of fun. Like, it's, for me, almost like a novel experience to be holding it to my eye and to be having that optical experience. So I wouldn't say there's no value there, but the way that I shoot, I use the screen as my main point of composition and framing the shot. I like to shoot a lot of low angle. This doesn't really behoove me. I'm also left eye dominant, so like, not the most comfortable. My face grease gets all over the screen. Big problem. I love Josh's like yoga poses for shooting.
What am I like?
You have like yoga poses for shooting.
Yeah, that's
you like
right.
Get into very specific.
That's because I don't always
like,
look at the screen.
Aikido stance. The rangefinder, I think it's cool, it's unique, it's novel, not really for me. Another thing that is interesting or different about this camera as opposed to many systems that are coming out now, no articulated screen. So it does have an LCD obviously in the back here, but it is completely stationary and built into the body of the camera. It doesn't flip out, there's no angle changing.
And that's
so if
without a doubt a downside. No arguing here.
If you're an analog shooter, then that's gonna feel very comfortable and not at all out of the ordinary to you, but if you...
Right, but to your point, there's an LCD on this camera. So there's an LCD, they could have made it articulating, and there's another thing that they left out, which you had mentioned to me and I agreed with of that LCD, which is the touchscreen.
Right, no touchscreen control on this LCD. If you imagine you're never ever gonna use that sort of feature and you really are just trading in your Minolta or something, probably no sweat off your back, but for anyone who does see themselves wanting to use a touchscreen or an articulated screen, you're kind of stuck.
I will give you one counterpoint, and it's certainly not making up for the lack of a touchscreen, but they do have something that's really nice on this camera. They have this little joystick on the back of the camera, and you can use that to move your focus point. What I really like about that is not only is it way quicker than using a directional pad, it's one button that you could just kind of rest your thumb on, it's really comfortable placement and quickly move the focus point, but it also frees up that directional pad to become function buttons. And I find that there's a ton of customization there because those aren't tied up with moving your focus point. Really, really positive point there for the camera.
So in addition to carrying over the kind of classic old school Fuji form factor, this camera also has the Fuji color profiles that they've incorporated into pretty much all of their digital cameras, which people know and love. I spent most of my time shooting with classic chrome, which is kind of one of the default color settings I really, really liked. They've also got a new black and white color profile called Acros, which is really great looking. So a lot of things that Fuji fans can expect to see across their digital line here also in the X-Pro2.
So were you happy with the image quality from the camera?
Yeah, I mean, I really loved the images that come out of this camera. I think that it's you know, that Fuji magic we've always talked about and other people always talk about. Beautiful depth of field, creamy bokeh. You know, just when you get the image, it's very often outstanding.
Yeah, I mean, I have to agree with you. I found that I was really impressed with the image quality out of the camera. The high ISO performance is outstanding. I didn't push it too high. It goes to 51,200, I believe, but I was shooting around 12,800 for several shots, and I found that the grain was really acceptable, really low. I would compare it probably to a 6400 on a Micro Four Thirds camera, and it was a really usable image. I also found that unlike the X-T10, which we had tested a few months ago, the X-Pro2 has a really nice autofocus for single mode anyway. It's not outstanding in continuous mode, but when you're shooting in single focus mode, I found that it was really speedy. I nailed the focus on most of the street shots. I would say probably a 90% success rate there. So really enjoyable overall from an image quality perspective.
We're standing here on Moscow Street in Chinatown. It's very short and it's sloped. It used to be much longer back when the 5 points converged in Chinatown, which you may have heard of if you've seen the film Gangs of New York. And it was named after Lower East Side activist Frank Lee Moscow. It's a great place actually to get cheap food. You can get some pretty cheap dumplings down here. And actually, I've come down here a couple of times and there's hardly anyone down here usually, but it's like a cool little street. It's a little bit off the main beaten path for tourists, but you know, interesting view of the new Freedom Tower behind us as well.
So while you were shooting a minute ago, you brought up a quirk of the camera, which I wanted to talk about, which is, we were talking about the knobs and dials, and some people will adamantly defend the physical knob and dial, and I understand that. I actually do like the immediacy of it, of knowing exactly where to go and not confusing if it's the front lever or the back lever. But one thing that is a little weird on this camera is if you're using the shutter speed dial, it goes in whole stop increments. So it'll go from 2,000 to 4,000 to 8,000, for example. But what gets a little weird is if you want to go in third stop increments, then you wind up having to use this knob and also the dial on the back of the camera, which kind of defeats the purpose to me. I get it that you don't want to have every third stop increment on there, but I don't know, it's just slightly awkward if you do need those third stops. Another thing that's slightly awkward for me is the ISO dial, which you have to actually just lift this up and turn. But one thing I do love on this camera is how they handle auto ISO. Just like other Fujis, you can set a minimum and maximum ISO, and you could also set what your minimum shutter speed is. So when you're shooting in the equivalent of aperture priority on this camera, you can say, I don't want my shutter speed to dip below 1/200th. And the greatest thing about it is you can have 3 presets that you can quickly switch between. So maybe 1/250th for street photography and 1/60th for just shooting people posing for you. It's really great.
So we are at Columbus Park in Chinatown, and this is the site where the 5 points used to converge. It was 5 streets that intersected, and that's where the name came from. If you've seen the film Gangs of New York, you will have a vague understanding of that. It was a huge hotbed for crime and illegal activity back in the mid to late 1800s before the city tore it down because it was just too much. So speaking of film, Josh is going to talk about video. Yeah,
so let's talk about video on the camera by not talking about video on the camera. In traditional Fuji fashion, the video is really not stellar. Now, I'm not going to say the image quality hasn't improved. It has. It'll do 1080p at 60. But in terms of manual control, like moving focus points and peaking while you're shooting video, it's just not there. And they're not trying to market this camera at anyone who really wants to do anything other than the casual video clip, so no need to talk further about it.
Yeah, if you are buying this camera intending to shoot video, you're silly. Don't do that. You're obviously, you know, a still shooter. And on an unrelated note, the Wi-Fi app on this camera I would like to touch on because we had a few gripes before. Josh didn't like that previously on the Wi-Fi app you couldn't kind of scroll through your photos. You can now do that. So I would say the Wi-Fi app has been improved.
So the Fuji X-Pro2 is $1699 for the body only. It's not the cheapest camera, but if you're looking for an interchangeable lens rangefinder, it's about as low as you're gonna get.
Right, but if you want to test it out, you can get it for even cheaper from our friends at Lens2Go who will rent you this system. They're amazing to work with. They sent everything to us super fast, very easy, safely packed, and we've had a great experience with them and a lot of fun playing with this camera.
Yeah, and there was the extra feature in the box, which I really appreciated.
Yes, I got to open the box and I opened up the Pelican case and there was a blow pop inside, nestled safely within the foam pack.
Nice touch on that
Yes,
one.
that makes it an extra fun surprise. We're just about done with this guy and we have to send it back to them tomorrow. So closing thoughts, this camera is fantastic if you're coming from an analog system, if you're very acclimated to using the knobs and dials associated with your classic 35mm film camera, you're probably going to enjoy this a lot. It's fun to shoot with the rangefinder, a cool kind of retro experience, whether that's just something you want to try out or the way you are used to shooting. I think you'll have a lot of fun with this. It makes beautiful images for a old school shooter.
Yeah, I mean, I have to agree. It's really a pleasure shooting with this rangefinder style camera. Again, it's not every modern feature you might be looking for in a camera. This is a niche product, but if you're looking for that rangefinder kind of analog experience, this might be the camera for you. Right.
So thank you guys so much for watching our review of the Fujifilm X-Pro2, and please subscribe.
Please subscribe.
Subscribe.